Hi, everybody. It's Susan here, and today we're going to have a look at the lunar eclipse in Taurus, which I think I have unconsciously or consciously been avoiding looking at because it's just been so intense. So I was trying to reflect on how to express this eclipse, which is actually the end of this 2-year cycle, which began in November of 2021. So if you remember, it feels like 100 years ago, but November 2021 was indeed just less than 2 years ago. And on the 19th of November, we had an eclipse for the first time in this axis of Taurus and Scorpio. And the nodes at that time were still in Gemini Sagittarius. So it was a slightly different flavor. And it just set off this cycle. Now, this is the last time that we're going to have an eclipse in this axis for the next 9 years, let's say, because there will be one with the reverse nodes, but in 18 years with the North Node going through Taurus and the South Node going through Scorpio. So it is an end of an era, we could say, and certainly it is going to go out with a bang. We have quite a lot of dynamism here, just an enormous amount of conflict between what one might consider to be one's values, represented by Taurus, with the moon at 4 degrees of Taurus. Now, look, they don't line up. The luminaries do not line up because I'm using the eclipse chart, not the full moon chart. So the full moon chart takes, that's a couple of, not very long after, like an hour later or so. I can't remember exactly when, but I'm using the eclipse chart. This is the peak moment of the eclipse, which is 8:15 universal time, 8:15 in the evening, 2015 universal time. And so this is for all of us on the 28th of October. Although I think actually it pushes into the 29th for those of you in the far eastern edge of the East, so East Asia, maybe Australia, for sure Australia, it's overnight on the 29th. So let's say 28th, 29th. And we're looking at something that builds quite a lot of tension. So as I say, those degrees don't add up, but this is the eclipse chart, not the full moon chart. So for those of you who are interested in astrology, there's a distinction between the two. It's minor, so don't worry about it. You can also use the full moon chart. It's just not technically the eclipse chart. Now, the moon is at 4:28, the sun is at 5:06. And of course, the nodes have already shifted since mid-July into the Aries Libra axis. And so this is an out of sign eclipse. Nonetheless, it's still quite powerful because here it's within sort of 9 degrees of the nodes. Whenever an eclipse happens when it's within about 15 degrees of the nodes. It just weakens. And so the closer it is to the nodes, obviously, the stronger it is. So much to say. Let's go back. I just want to briefly go back. I pulled up that chart to see how this was affecting the current chart. And so we have, this is the partial eclipse that happened in November. That eclipse, like I said, was also with the nodes out of sign. So that was when they were coming up to the end of Gemini and the end of Sagittarius, shifting into those signs. It's shifting into then Taurus and Scorpio afterwards. Sorry, my dog has decided to go mental with somebody outside the door. And so these eclipses line up in a really interesting way. So keeping in mind, these are bookends. These are both telling the two different ends of a story that we've been living for the last 2 years. And the first one is that Uranus is almost on the degree point. Both Uranus and Jupiter are retrograde. Uranus is again retrograde in this eclipse, and it's almost on the degree point of Jupiter. And opposing that, we have Mars. So Uranus is in opposition to Mars in that initial eclipse, and Jupiter is now in opposition to Mars in this current eclipse. Very, very, very tight oppositions. Both of them, Jupiter, Mars, almost exactly opposite. So really significant. We also have Mercury in opposition to the Uranus of the 28th of October eclipse. And so that Mercury is highlighting something, or what was understood at that time in November is highlighting something that Uranus is working on changing at this time. So the Uranus focusing here on what Jupiter has brought in and what Jupiter is digesting in the retrograde phase in opposition to Mars. So the trigger for violence, the unpredictability of that particular eclipse is still with us here, except that now we have somehow a realization of what this represents. Now we have Jupiter, hopefully, please God, bringing some wisdom and understanding, some sense of a higher understanding of what is going on. But Jupiter opposing Mars in mundane astrology is a lot. It's a lot of potential violence, conflict, disagreement. No matter how you slice it, Mars is very much about separation, disagreement, not getting along. Mars is not into cooperating. That is also part of the energy of Mars in Scorpio, which is not cooperating in a hidden way, in a strategic way, in a way that is perhaps mischievous, secretive, criminal even. And so all of these hidden motives of Mars in Scorpio conjunct Mercury, also in opposition of that, that Jupiter, are highlighting something that we want to deal with now, but was already there 2 years ago. I find this really interesting that it's actually in such a tight conjunction here, that the theme is repeating after 2 years. So we also have Saturn from this 28th of October eclipse, which is squaring the nodes of that initial eclipse of this series from the 19th of November, 2021. And so whatever we're figuring out right now with Saturn at the very beginning of Pisces is trying to cut through what was being presented to us in November 2021. What are we trying to establish, and how are we trying to establish that? It has to come in through Saturn, making it real. But Saturn is still retrograde. It's not ready to concretize things until November. So Saturn will be stationing direct as of the 4th of November and then moving forward again. So we're not quite there. Now, Pluto, just for the fun of it, is squaring the Pluto from November 2021 is squaring the nodal axis of the 28th of October. And so there's this calling back to what was going on at the end of 2021, perhaps some triggers, some things that were hidden, some things that were not clear. And we are now grappling with all of that, what to do about that. That is this Pluto in square to the nodes. A transformation is necessary, transformation based on what we have understood over the last 2 years is necessary. There's no getting away from that. So let's take this eclipse away and we'll come back to the 28th of October, which we're focusing on right now. What's very interesting from the point of view of the axis of Taurus and Scorpio, just to come back to the basic meanings of Taurus and Scorpio, is that they are very materialistic signs. They are about wealth. Of course, yes, every sign has its spiritual side as well, but we'll start from scratching the surface. So there are materialistic signs about wealth and security. That also is about health. That can be about physical and emotional health as well, with Taurus representing physical well-being and health, food, whatever sustains us, the things that we need for security, and Scorpio representing the things that we need on a psychological level, emotional, psychological level. And then the other aspect of this is that there is this tension between Taurus and Scorpio where they're not known for wanting to share. They want to amass. They want to hold on and control. Scorpio is known for that energy of controlling. And please, in the comments, do not say, yes, I am a Scorpio and I am not like that. This is the archetype the archetype of the sign. This is not describing an individual. These are the archetypes of the signs. So the archetype of Scorpio is controlling, it is manipulation, it is working behind the scenes, very strategic. You definitely want a Scorpio on your side if things are in crisis. I think we can easily say things are in crisis now, but when they're not on your team, you better watch out, because they will surprise you. The surprise attack is classic sort of Scorpio. So they will go deep into the understanding of things, not afraid to go deep into taboo issues, not afraid to go deep into things that are a little on the gritty side, including potentially illegal things, going underground. This is quite literally one of the meanings of Scorpio, whether that be through tunnels or petroleum or anything that's underground, minerals and mining and so on. The deep, deep sea is Scorpio. And so we're looking at a power to go deep, deep into things, but not a power for cooperation. The Scorpio is not about cooperation. It's about what's in it for me. And keeping in mind that the polar opposite, Taurus, is always in play, because we can't separate them out. And Taurus is about security. So Scorpio is operating from a place of needing security, and that's the way that it will deal with that. On the other end of that, we have the Taurus end, which is about the beauty and the harmony, and let's try and do this together, and let's work towards that. But with the fixity of Taurus and Scorpio, and also with the unconscious or the hidden motivation behind Taurus, which is the fear of losing control, fear of change, fear of transformation, Scorpio being about transformation and in the deepest, darkest places, metaphorically and literally. And these are energies that don't change readily. And so especially with the fixed signs, often change comes really slowly, and we only change when the pain has gone on for a long time. So if you know anybody with a lot of fixed energy, and particularly Taurus and Scorpio, these are the people that will be hanging on to a marriage that died years ago and not leave. They'll be resisting changing from that horrible job with that abusive boss for years and years before doing something about it. This is where we have the energy of resentments and jealousies, and it's my team and my possessions and my stuff and my security. And these energies are very, very powerful. Now, I'm painting an especially bleak picture. There's, of course, ways of seeing these in a very positive light. Of course, we have the fearlessness of Scorpio. We have that sort of bravery and courage that especially Mars and Scorpio can bring as well. And then Taurus can bring beauty and harmony into our lives. But now when we look at this from a collective point of view, we're always going to have to slightly bias towards the negative implications. Now, when I do the sign by sign interpretations, it's of course going to be very different. Individuals, of course, having a lot more leeway for change than nations and international communities. And so it's always going to be skewed a little bit negative towards the interpretation, because that's how we roll on this planet. So the energy of this Taurian faith, what we could call, or loyalty, can lead to, again, a resistance to change, a resistance to seeing things from another perspective. Loyalty can turn to obsessiveness as well. Scorpio is also known for its obsession. And so what can be something that is stable and enduring and reliable can also turn into something fanatical and obsessive. So we have to keep this in mind as we're looking at these quite tense oppositions in the current chart, in the eclipse chart. We have also, with Jupiter in retrograde in Taurus, another interpretation of that. Again, if we're thinking in terms of the more mundane application, we have Jupiter in Taurus retrograde, suggesting that there is a determination to hold on to values, a determination to hold on to what we feel is important, our material wealth, the accumulation of wealth, and hold on to that at all costs. whereas also the higher way of looking at Jupiter would be that we are discerning and we have the wisdom and we have this understanding, we have this capacity to learn from whatever is happening in our experience. And that Jupiter in opposition to Mercury brings a little bit of hope, but hey ho, Mercury is in Scorpio and it's right next to the ruler of Scorpio, Mars, which suggests that Mercury is much more negatively biased at this time. And so it's much more in the fearful energy or an underhanded energy or an energy of, again, separation and not cooperation, where on top of that, it's very close to the sun and therefore hidden. Mars is still very close to the sun and still hidden, and that adds to this energy of, and that means literally, by the way, for those of you new to astrology, it's hidden outside. You can't see these planets because they're too close to the sun at this time. And so the rising of these planets is an event which is very important because it changes the energy quite dynamically, and that we're only going to see in November when Mars finally rises and we're able to see it separate from the sun. It's still too close to the sun at this time. So that adds to the energy of secrecy, of something going on behind the scenes, of something that we're not fully understanding, of violence that can come from a dark place, revenge and control, and issues of fear of loss of one's possessions, one's land, one's security. Now we see that in spades around the world. And I'm not going to go there. So I'll leave that up to you. And so we have with the moon and the North Node and hey-ho Aries as well, conjunct the North Node still, which it seems like that's also been forever, but it's been several weeks now that Aries has been conjunct the North Node, adding to a feeling of resentment, adding to a percolating sense of not being heard, not being respected, not being dignified, or not being treated with dignity, let's say, a feeling of injustice and wanting to throw a spanner in the works. And here we have that on top of the North Node. So there's just enormous rage. This is ruled by that Mars that I've just described. And that is happening in the same nakshatra. Now, remember, these nakshatras are part of the constellations. They are not part of the tropical astrology. They're two separate ways of calculating the astrology. So we use here the tropical astrology to create the horoscope, and we use the sidereal or the star-based constellations to create the nakshatra passages, but we can find them in the degrees in the tropical zodiac. So these are happening now, Aries, North Node, and Moon, all happening in the nakshatra of Ashwini. And Ashwini, and I think in fact, actually, Jupiter just goes out of Ashwini. So Jupiter is just in Bharani, which is quite heavy for Jupiter. Anyway, point being that Ashwini is about amassing wealth. And this calls to mind the Billie Holiday song. I think it's called God Bless the Child. I think that's the title of it. You know this, my singing is terrible, but them that's got shall get, them that's not shall lose. Though the Bible said, and it still is news. So this is, and here's the most important part. Mama may have, Papa may have, God bless the child who's got his own, who's got his own. Now, sorry about the singing, but I wanted you to get that sense, because this is literally the significance of this nakshatra, which can be very positive, can be extremely enriching. People with the moon here and this early degrees of Taurus, late degrees of Aries have good wealth. They have the capacity to generate wealth, but they also have that desire to hold on to wealth. And what's most important is that that wealth tends to come from wealth, just like the song says, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. But we want to understand that in these times especially, we must understand that we have our own resources. We have to be a resource unto ourselves. And especially with the moon in Taurus, we want to understand, what are my values? What are my values? All of this in opposition, Sun, Mercury, and Mars in Scorpio, suggesting separation, suggesting something mysterious, suggesting something that is frightening, that can be violent, that can be desiring control. And again, this is not in your personal chart necessarily. For some of you, of course, this is the way that life is, but it's for most of us, it's going to be far more positive. We'll see that when I go through sign by sign, but I just want to point this out collectively, that there is this a fear of not having enough that makes us want more, and we need to understand that it is God or divinity or the universe that bestows abundance. It is not something we have to cling to. It is not something that we have to amass. I said earlier, Taurus and Scorpio are not into sharing. They don't like sharing. They want to have stuff on their own. There's a jealous aspect to that. There's a hoarding aspect to that. And again, it's not about the individual, it's about the archetype we're talking about here. So we want to be aware of that and start to understand, well, wait, what are my values here? What are my values? Let's find Venus and try and understand. Oh, Venus, look at, there she is, ruling that lunar eclipse in Taurus. And Venus is in Virgo right now. So she's there looking for healing. She's there looking for ways of working through things in a practical way, in a pragmatic way. How can we be pragmatic? Venus is actually in a trine to Uranus. Uranus is backing up into a trine there. With Venus. And so that suggests that there is a lot of change and volatility around what we value or how we feel secure, or do we even feel secure? Venus is, of course, ruling that Uranus too. And Venus is also ruling the South Node, which is in Libra, which is suggesting that the way that we used to communicate or relate, or the way that we used to, in some cases, hold treaties and agreements, is no longer valid. It's no longer working for us. We need to revise this based on something that is more current, because we're seeing that it's all sort of falling away. Now, this, I want to also mention, and I don't think I did, that Mars that I described is ruling that North Node and Aries, and of course Chiron as well. So where am I going with this? So the fact that the North Node and the Moon are in Ashwini is an opportunity for us to understand that we all have some inherent skill, asset, talent, capacity to create abundance, to create wealth, that we don't need to fight each other for it, that wealth is not finite. That we can share, that we can get along. So the same energy that says, I'm afraid of sharing, I don't have enough, I want more, I need more, I haven't got enough, that Moon North Node is very emotional. It's extremely emotional, very volatile, very emotionally and psychologically unstable even. It can also bring about an understanding. So everything has this duality. There's always those two possibilities, and it depends on where you're coming from. And so I'm suggesting here that if we come very strongly from the place of what do I value, then we will have the solution to the challenges that are in direct opposition to this eclipse, which are really pushing things to the max of fear, of violence, of aggression, of power politics. That may or may not be the case between individuals, depending on your chart. Those who have fixed house energies, fixed placements, will be definitely feeling this the most. I mean, it's not an easy time, folks. I don't think I need to tell you that. It's not really a news flash. So Pluto is still in a square to the nodes, and now this square is easing off, just like the trine to Uranus. The Pluto trine to Uranus is easing off. As Uranus moves further and further back, the Pluto trine Uranus gets weaker and weaker. And as Pluto moves towards Aquarius, we won't see that energy again until 2026, 2027, 2028, when they will come back into a trine when Pluto is in Aquarius and Uranus goes into Gemini. God help us all. Let's just get there, shall we? So we've got the Pluto squaring the nodes here just until about the time of this eclipse. And then it starts to fade and moves on. So we're looking with transiting squares, especially from slow moving placements, we want to look at maybe 2 to 3 degrees of orb. And we're just looking at a 3-degree orb here. And so it's time now to call this fading. I'm going to say it's a fading square. We're very, very happy to say goodbye to the Pluto squaring the nodes. This is the intensity that we've been feeling about the draw to transform based on the past or based on the future. Where are we going with this? And let's face it, most people don't know whether they're coming or going, and most especially our leaders. We probably could safely say, though, that our leaders are in this domain of greed, control, power control, and fear-based living. So, right, and that's that Earth trine with Pluto and Uranus has been shaking up immense amounts of trust in institutions, trust in money, trust in resources. How do we relate to each other? How do we connect with each other through what we own, through what we, who controls what? And so there we are. That's fading as well. Not to suggest that anything is going to necessarily be easy from here on in, but just to say, at least it'll be different. And thank goodness for that. So let me just check my notes to make sure that I'm covering those big things. Yeah, I noted here that it would be a really good time to examine all bigotry. Where do you hold bigotry? Fear and loathing of the other. Remember, there is no other, fundamentally. Jealousy, selfishness, greed, manipulation. What are your values? Just keep coming back to that. Figure it out. What are your values? And most importantly, are you actually living through them? You can say what you like about your values, but if you don't walk the talk, they are just showing off, basically. You're simply doing that kind of performative Instagram version of values. So let's stop here with that. I want you to really deeply reflect. This is that Scorpio, go really, really deep reflection. Scorpio, Mercury, Mars in Scorpio conjunct the sun. Reflect deeply. What is wise? What are your values? What do we need to do? How do we lift this out of the quagmire? We have to do that with our own individual resources. The other aspect of Ashwini, by the way, is to bring people together to generate more security, more resources. Now, again, that can lead to cultish thinking, dogma, but it can also lead to really beautiful new things. So always reflect, what are my values? What are my values? What are my values? Be open to change, especially if you've got a lot of fixed energy. Be open to change. Be open to thinking, gosh, I might be wrong. I might be wrong, and maybe I do not know. Don't believe every thought you think. So let's have a look now. If we go back, we're going to start with Aries, and we'll see for Aries how this all takes shape. So for Aries, sun or moon or ascendant sign, you're having the North Node, of course, move through your sign between July 2023 and January 2025. That means the South Node is in your house of relationships. And this particular eclipse, because it's a lunar eclipse, it's happening in your second house, the Taurus, the moon and Jupiter and Uranus in your second house, which are highlighting something we need to understand, or you as Aries needs to understand about your values, about your finances, perhaps, investments, money, This can have something to do with family. What is going on? On the other side of this, there's challenges around that, especially if this is about shared resources in terms of your spouse, for example, or a business partner. Something's changing here in a big way. When Mars goes through the 8th, that's not easy because it suggests that there's conflict around shared resources. There's something that isn't working super well. There's something that might even be working against you. There's quite a lot of energy there. And so you want to reflect on how you're managing your money, who is managing your money, areas of trust, issues of trust, issues of who has the keys to what, and observing how you're dealing with that, what it is that you might need to change in terms of your values, in terms of your own personal self-worth as well. Are you allowing things to happen in a way that serves you or not? Are you the one that's causing some upset or conflict? It depends again on your natal chart, but is this conflict coming from you? And in that case, can you recognize where you have your part to play? And we'll need to revise how it is that you're reaching out with people. At the same time, Venus, which is ruling this eclipse, also ruling the South Node, is in your 6th house of everyday work. And so this can have something to do with your work and the type of work that you're doing. This may have something to do with your health. But Venus in the 6th is usually something to do with your day-to-day schedule, day-to-day job. And it can also be around relationships with colleagues, business professionals, and employees, if you have them. That can be anyone from your cleaner at home to actual employers that you might have if you run a business. And so there's quite a lot of energy here through relationships, but it looks like it's tied to money. Now, Mars, of course, is ruling the North Node. That's also your ruler in the 1st house from the 8th house. So there's a lot of stuff that may not be very clear for you, could be unconscious, might be hidden from sight, or because we also have Neptune and Saturn in the 12th, there might be something that is not entirely above board. Now, make sure that you sort things out if things are not above board, because once Saturn goes direct, and certainly when this energy shifts away from the eclipse, then that will become noticeable. And then once Jupiter shifts, moves direct in the 2nd house too, then the money issues ideally should also lighten up. That's going to be from the end of December. So good luck, Aries. I'll see you in the next video. So Taurus, this is of course happening in your 1st house. This is a moon in your sign, whether you have the sun, moon, or rising. It's in the 1st house from any of those points. And this is in the axis of self and other. The North Node is in your 12th house. So there's something here that suggests that there's a need for observing your own spiritual needs, what you could call your relationship to spirit, your relationship to your unconscious mind. That can also have something to do with worrying or dealing with loss of some kind. In this case, that might also be around a relationship of some kind. Sorry. There's workmen around here, and there's a terrible smell of petroleum. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's all that Scorpio energy. And it's kind of making me gag every now and then. So apologies for that. And so here we are with that the North Node in the 12th. The South Node is in the 6th house. So something needs to change in terms of your everyday dynamic. This is also ruled by Venus coming from the 5th, and so it's coming from your own creative input, your own creative resources. So you're seeing something about yourself, your needs, what you understand about what's going on in relationship that might be, at the very least, more dynamic right now, but that you're seeing the dynamics of relationships from a place that comes more from what you would like and what you need in your experience in your life. Now, this is, of course, the North Node in the 12th. It's there till January 2025. And it is a time for you to pull a little more of your energy inward into your spiritual nature. If you do work with foreign lands, foreigners, and so on, that will also bring a lot of business and opportunities there. So this can actually be a business opportunity because Mars, which is ruling that 12th, is in the 7th house of business partnerships, and that can be quite supportive. So it's not all bad necessarily. And then, of course, Pluto is still in the 9th, and that suggests also that you have perhaps something still to complete in terms of abroad, or people abroad, or figures, authority figures of any kind. Yeah, and so this Jupiter is also ruled by Venus. Uranus also ruled by Venus in the first, and so that that Venus is in a trine, favorably, or in an Earth trine, favorably trining Uranus. So something is different, something is changing in terms of your attitude towards yourself at the time of this eclipse. Keeping in mind something I forgot to mention in the introduction, that this also resonates with what was going on in April. So 20th of April and the 5th of May, we had eclipses that were really triggering this point. This it was at the 4-degree point where the north and south nodes were in Taurus and Scorpio. And so this is resonating. Go back into the spring and try and find that resonance, 20th of April and the 5th of May, and around that time, a few weeks on either side, and go back and see what was going on for me, what was new for me, and have a look at that. So Venus is asking you to be creative and look into potentially new love interests. But I'd say, honestly, if you're meeting love interests with this kind of scorpionic energy, you better be ready to handle it, because it's going to be hot, to say the least. So good luck with that, Taurus. I'll see you in the next video. Gemini, you're having the eclipse in Gemini rising, sun or moon, all of you, all those positions, or a stellium even, and you're having that eclipse in your 12th house. So you're understanding something potentially about your own motivations, what it is that you're doing that you should no longer be doing, or what it is that you're not doing that you should be doing. Potentially also where you find that you are not working in your own best interest, and this is especially because Uranus and Jupiter are both retrograde right now, perhaps showing you from based on recent experience what it is that needs to change. Now that can also be around ancestors. It can also be around issues that are psychological in nature, potentially, since you also have Pluto in the 8th and Venus, which is ruling that 12th, is in the 4th house. There can be quite a lot of energy around your mood, your psychological nature, what you're feeling. Are you feeling safe and secure? And that also applies because the 6th house is very full. There looks like there's an enormous amount of dynamism in that house of health and illness, where it can be just about everyday routines, just about what it is that is going on, perhaps your work. There might be a fear of loss. This is the 12th house is the house of loss as well. And there can be a very strong impact, a fear of loss. For Gemini now, keeping in mind that your chart resembles the ascendant for the actual eclipse is indeed it's exactly this chart. So it is in the Gemini ascendant, and so your chart is literally, go back and listen to what I said in the beginning and see what resonates for you there. But on a personal level, the planets in the 6th house can cause some kind of strife. There can be some challenges there, but it's quite good to have malefics in the 6th. You've got Mars in its rulership in Scorpio in the 6th, and that can give you the determination to overcome obstacles, overcome difficulties, because it's the house of obligations, contracts, obstacles of all kinds, duties and obligations of all kinds. It can be a very heavy time for Gemini right now, because your ruler is squashed between two malefics. So keeping in mind that technically the sun is a malefic, it's a sharp planet, Tikshna, and so between Mars and the sun we find your ruler. So that's considered hemmed in, and it's not necessarily comfortable for Gemini right now. So it looks like there is a lot of potential soul searching that's necessary. There may be a need to call on support from home, from family, or with Venus in the 4th, you might just want to retreat under the duvet and kind of hide away. This is the other aspect of the 12th house. It's disappearing, it's finding shelter, retreating, going away. Honestly, I think we should all do a bit of that. The world would be a better place if we would only just all go away. And so what else do we need to point out here? Yes, of course, the North Node is in the 11th house. This is bringing you new ideals, new dreams, new wishes for the future. You're seeing your life differently now. And Gemini, you're going to feel not only are your goals changing, but also your groups are changing. The friends are changing. Your sense of what is important is changing. It can be also that with children, this Mercury representing children as well, there may be something going on that is challenging. You have to deal with it around children, and there's something that you are having to let go around children, something happening in their lives, perhaps, that they're dealing with, that they're letting go, they're transforming, and that's pulling in a new direction for you then. So the consequences of what you can let go in terms of your kids are allowing you to feel or causing you to feel something new has to come in. What is my life now focused on for the long term? These are not short-term goals, but your longer-term focus. Keeping in mind that your day-to-day efforts, the Mars in the 6th house, are what is ruling that North Node. So this is something at the moment that is quite pragmatic, quite practical. It does depend on you and your actions here with the North Node ruled by that Mars in the 6th. Alrighty, so good luck with that, Gemini, and I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, sun, moon, or rising. We're having the eclipse. I say we because I have moon and rising sun in Cancer. And of course, the moon rules Cancer. And so these lunar events are always significant. The moon is in the 11th house. This is the house of future goals and dreams, groups as well. It's a house of income from what you do. And so with Jupiter retrograde since the 4th of September, Uranus retrograde now as well, that might feel a little unstable. I wouldn't worry too much about that because there is a trine from Venus from the 3rd, ruled by Mercury from the 5th. Your creativity actually is what is going to help you in terms of the money, but maybe it's coming to your awareness now what you need to do, how you need to manifest that, or even do you want to do the same thing, or does that require some kind of change? And this is especially true because the North Node of this eclipse is in your 10th house of career, your ambition, what it is that you do, how you do it, and where you want to put your energy. This is in recognized achievement. It's about becoming an authority. And that is, again, coming back to this Mars that's ruling it, Mars in Scorpio through the 5th, which is very much about personal efforts, creativity, drive, potentially around competition as well, because the 5th house, just like the 3rd house, suggests competition. Venus is in the 3rd, and that can be it can be healthy competition. It's like sports or a sense of competing against yourself, for example. It's like, I really want this because that's the North Node in Aries after all, and therefore I want to do better, or I want to do more, etc. Now the 5th house also represents children. And this can also mean that something going on in the life of your child, something that is new and different or requiring effort on the part of your child, is showing up in your 11th house as something that is changing your perspective. And you're just noticing that. So you're seeing the results of what is going on in your children's life as well. Yeah, for these things, it's easier, of course, if I see a natal chart. It's difficult to generalize. There's so many different potential incarnations here. I also forgot to mention in terms of the moon that the moon is actually sextiling Saturn. So there is something here that is a restraint. There is this potential that can be very moody, very explosive, but there is a restraint. And for the water signs like Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, that restraint is actually helpful. So it takes some of the pressure off. So that Saturn in sextile to the moon is actually quite welcome, although it can have the feeling of limitation. So again, if we come back to the sense that the 11th house, being the second from the 10th, is the house of earnings, from the career and from what you do, and Saturn might be just feeling like a drag on what you're able to realize in the 11th. But keep in mind that the moon is exalted in Taurus in the 11th house, very, very happy. And it looks like you have a lot of support from benevolent friends, from people around you. and that can be very welcome. What else do we need to say for Cancer? Yes, so you've still got, of course, Pluto in the 7th house, trining that Uranus in the 11th. And this is also squaring the nodes. So Pluto from the 7th squaring the nodes. And so it can be that certain relationships, certain ways of relating, certain aspects of relationship that can be business partners, or it can be old relationships, old friends, good friends, or lovers, or marital partners, etc. That is going to transform, and this is really the sort of end of it. It's like now we're moving on. So think from November 2021 until this point, that transition has been somehow complete in this particular frame of reference. We're not done with you yet, Cancer, because Pluto moves into the 8th. So that's for another time, where you can look at my Pluto video and see what that represents for Cancer, Sun, Moon, or Rising. All right, so good luck, Cancer. Make the most of this. It's actually easiest for the water signs, to be honest, because this is happening in what are called the helpful or lucky houses, the trinal houses. So the 5th, Saturn in the 9th, and then all the rest in the 11th house. So thank God for small blessings. Good luck. So Leo, this is happening, the eclipse is happening in your 10th house of career. There's been a lot of activity for Leo's Sun, Moon, or Rising in the 10th house for a very long time, because you've had Uranus there since May 2018, and you've got Jupiter there since the middle of May 2023, and it continues right through till mid-May 2024. And so we have this now lunar eclipse that's showing up something that you're seeing about your social status, or about your role in the world, or about your marital status, or about your career, vocation, how you want to be of service, how you want to show up outside your house, basically. And something here is being realized. Something here is in your awareness, and it's based on that the North Node connection, which is suggesting that there's a new way of seeing yourself here, potentially a new idea around your purpose and your role that is taking shape. It's not yet taken shape, because we're just at the beginning of this passage of a year and a half, where the North Node will go through your 9th house. It's going to completely transform the way you see yourself and what it is that you feel is your purpose, your interactions with authority figures, and your way of dealing with things based on emotions. And that we see particularly because not only is the moon there in the 10th, but also with all of this 4th house activity in Scorpio, Sun, Mercury, Mars in Scorpio, and you've got also Saturn and Neptune in your 8th house. There's a lot of psychological stuff coming up for Leos, perhaps a lot of churning around the home, or around your inner home, what makes you happy, what you need to be happy, what you need to feel secure. And that may not be terribly easy, but there's a realization around this at the time of this eclipse, and that awareness, this light shining on the moon that brings that into your awareness, is going to help you realize what it is that needs to be done, what needs to be redirected, perhaps, or emphasized or de-emphasized in your life. And of course, the South Node, which is ruled by Venus, Venus being in your house of money currently, your house of what supports you, your family, particularly your investments, your money, your stuff. That's ruling that South Node in the 3rd house. And so there's a different way of thinking about things, a different way of communicating about things. That is, there's a need for a higher-minded approach with the North Node going into the 9th house. So something needs to change. Venus is ruling that moon from the 2nd house. Potentially review the introduction, where I'm talking about the meaning of Ashwini nakshatra in the where the moon and the North Node and Aries are currently, and try and understand from that what you might be valuing, how that might be showing up in your life in terms of your career, and is that working for you with rather more critical Venus in the 2nd house, a bit more fussy, perhaps not always seeing the glass half full. Keeping in mind your ruler is the sun. So your sun is, of course, a participant in this eclipse. It wouldn't be an eclipse without the sun. And that happens to be in the 4th house. And so it's important to recognize there's some need for you to go within, to deal with what's going on, either at home or with property issues or with issues that might be around your psychological and emotional or mental health. Or that of the people around you. So I wish you all the best, all the success that Jupiter in the 10th can bring, along with the moon up there. And I think you'll probably be feeling that only as of 2024 when Jupiter finally goes direct again. So good luck with that, Leo, and I'll see you soon. And so we've got Virgo now, ascendant, sun, or moon. The eclipse is happening in your 9th house. This is reflecting something of a higher motivation, an idea of what it is that you find important in terms of life philosophy, or what you believe, what you have faith in. This can also be something to do, of course, with values. Do watch the introduction again. Venus is in your 1st house, so that makes you feel more keenly aware of values and what it is that makes you happy, what you need to be happy. Venus in the 1st is going to light you up a little bit, make you feel very social and very engaged. This is actually a relatively easy placement for Virgo, because the moon and Jupiter in the 9th house is actually quite helpful. But when the moon is in the 9th, there can be this idea that everything should be perfect, then I will be happy. But be careful, because let's face it, on this human level, nothing is ever going to be perfect, because that's an idea coming from the mind. It is not perfect on the level of humanity. Perfection is divine. So you elevate that, take that up a notch. Perhaps that's where you can find more of a sense of your purpose in life as well, your sense of overall desire. What can I have faith in? It's not going to be in this material world, let's face it. And so here we have also the sun, Mercury, and Mars. Your ruler Mercury is hemmed in between the sun and Mars. Those are 2 malefics. So it's not temporarily not very comfortable. Perhaps there's some issues around communication or goals that require more effort, more diplomacy, perhaps more another way of approaching them. You have the North Node in the 8th house, which is shared resources, but it's also the place of your fears and your unconscious patterns and your psychological nature. It can be issues that are more occult. And of course, this is also the 9th house, where we have an awareness of the knowledge behind these occult practices, things like what we're doing right here. And that is also where we have this North Node eclipse. And so you might find quite a lot of solace in the occult. I'm guessing if you're listening to this right now, you do. But this could become something that becomes more important to you, since Pluto has been traipsing through your 5th house since 2008, and perhaps also changing your designs, your sense of your desire for creativity, your desire for learning, what it is that you want to do, and how you might apply what it is that you know creatively or as a hobby to an actual career, when Pluto goes into the 6th house and changes your everyday experience. So lots and lots and lots going on here. Be nice, please, because with your ruler next to Mars in the 3rd house in Scorpio, there can be a tendency towards impatience. There can be a tendency to consciously or unconsciously burn bridges, and that will be a tough job to repair. So silence is golden. Reflect on your values, reflect on what it is that is necessary and important. If you're not interested in certain relationships, or you're no longer working towards certain relationships, you can just let them go. You don't have to necessarily be too grumpy about it. And certainly that looks like the case with Saturn going through your 7th house, lots and lots changing there, setting new standards in relationship. That will be something that Virgos like. Higher standards. Stick to your standards. Find out what are my values and stick to those. And from the 4th of November, Saturn will start to clear, moving forward in your 7th. and give you an inkling until February of what was going on, what the heck was going on since March. All right, so now we have Libra in the first house. Now, Libra, the south node, of course, is in your sign, and this eclipse is happening in your 8th house. The 8th house is the house of shared resources, intimacy, sexual or psychological or emotional intimacy. It's very important in terms of how you are, how you feel around your emotional nature, your psychological nature. That would have had a complete and utter transformation, reconstruction over the last 15 years with Pluto going through the 4th house. That was not always easy, for sure, depending on your chart. And even still, not easy, squaring your ascendant. And so we're looking at a very big opportunity for you to see things in a new light, to try and understand what it is that you need through connection with others, through relationships, through what you share, the money you share, maybe even how are you investing, how are you holding on to your money, and is that appropriate? Are you perhaps part of the challenge that might be there in terms of finances or a dispute or any kind of difficulty around money? It looks like you're getting some benefits from other people, except that Jupiter is retrograde, and probably that's not going to show up fully, let's say, until 2024, when Jupiter moves direct again. And Jupiter is opposing Mercury and Mars. So whatever it is that are your goals and your ideas around either your values or your money or the things that you hold, the possessions that you have, there's some challenge there. And it may be between you and a spouse or you and a business partner. There's something that might not be terribly settled there. There can be issues around family, especially with Pluto in the 4th, but also the 2nd house represents family. And now you've got Sun, Mercury, and Mars there. So there may be some tension around family. With Jupiter retrograde in the 8th, there may be some issues around an inheritance or something that's causing some kind of tension, or a need for you to be stronger, a need for you to show up more powerfully in some way. Perhaps you are the one that needs to show up for the family. And that's, of course, got a cost in terms of your time and effort. Saturn going through the 6th suggests something similar as well, because Saturn through the 6th requires more effort, a lot of work, and a feeling perhaps of duty being put upon. With Neptune having gone through there since 2011, you may be overdoing it. You may be doing more than you really should, or more than your share. Neptune and Saturn retrograde right now could be a good time for you to reflect on that. Venus is ruling your 1st house and your 8th house from the 12th house. So there may be some fear around loss. There may be some fear around what is not above board, what isn't clear for you right now. When Venus moves into your 1st house, things will start to clarify. Give it time. Obviously, don't wait if something is obviously needing attention, but give it time until then. So good luck with all of that, Libra. I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio, this is happening in your 7th house. So for Sun, Moon, or Ascendant signs. In Scorpio, this is the Taurus full moon is in your 7th house, being highlighted by the Sun in your 1st. It's coming in opposition. Jupiter is in opposition. Direct, don't look at the moon degrees. It's not accurate. It should be 4 to 5 degrees. I'm just shifting forward as we go, and it just keeps changing the degrees. So Jupiter is in direct opposition to Mercury and Mars, which is your ruler. Mars is ruling Scorpio as well as Aries, which is where we find the North Node. And so there's tension here. There's something that you need to do, or something that you're realizing is needing to be done based on what you're understanding about your commitments with other people. That can be relationships of all kinds. That can be, for example, professional relationships, business partners. It can be, of course, your spouse, and important relationships like good old friends and things like that. This is all coming up for some new awareness. And as long as Jupiter is retrograde, you might still be mulling things over. There may be some things that you're wondering about with Uranus and Jupiter in the 7th. There can be very much a potential for relationships to move on and to split up, not necessarily working out. Jupiter in the 7th can mean that you are ending relationships, but ultimately it's good for you. But you may not feel that way in the moment, because it's of course difficult always to end a relationship, but it's not necessarily that it's like, yay, more relationships. It can be that it depends on your natal Jupiter, depends on also your natal Venus, because Jupiter is being ruled by Venus, which by transit is in the 11th, suggesting some new ideas around relating, new ideas around your future, around friends and social groups, potentially political groups as well. Honest to God, Scorpio, you may want to sit this one out. You won't probably, but you may want to sit this one out. If you want to keep any of your friends, don't get into politics. Don't get into the comings and goings of the world at the moment, because it's a losing battle. Let's face it, this is where everybody loses. Pluto is in the 3rd house of friends, and that is transforming rapidly. And so if you want to pal around with anybody after this period of time, come 2024, then sit this one out. The North Node is in the 6th house, so there's a lot going on in your everyday life, in your area of health, in your area of work, and something that you're aware that needs to change in that area. It will change, guaranteed that it will change when the North Node moves through there. The South Node going through the 12th is suggesting that more of your attention needs to be in the practical, day-to-day application of things, and less in the either behind the scenes or the more mystical, spiritual aspect of things. And either way, that is going to change how you show up every day, keeping in mind that Mars also rules that 6th house. So you're going to be busy for sure. You're going to be busy for the time that the North Node is there until January 2025. All right, Scorpio, make the most of this. Good luck with that, and I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, this is happening in your 6th house of everyday life. You're aware now of something that is developing or needing change in your either health or your day-to-day work habits, your stuff that you've got to do. That's not necessarily unpleasant. It's things that are showing up in your life that become obvious. And if this was in relationship to either money or health, this can actually be quite beneficial, because you have an opportunity now to revise and go over it. Jupiter is moving back through the degree points that it was at, going back into July and maybe even June. And so whatever has been going on since June, when Jupiter moves stations to go direct at the end of 2023, you'll start to find that forward momentum will really help. And so Jupiter is in opposition to Mercury and Mars, and that might be suggesting that there's something that you're doing that's not working in your favor. There might be some dissatisfaction. Mars in the 12th often can be dissatisfaction. It can be something that's either underhanded, or that you have a sense that maybe people are working against you, or there can be a sense that you might even be working against you, that you haven't really been paying close attention. Keep in mind that Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter in the 6th might have you working way too much, for example, especially since the North Node was there for a year and a half in your 6th house. So you may have been overdoing it in all kinds of ways, and potentially overdoing it in terms of how you eat as well, or how you party or whatever. Pay attention to any of those things that might cause some disruption in your overall well-being. Venus is in your 10th house, so there's support for your career. There's support for you and your ambitions and what it is that you would like to see. And so whatever is going on in your everyday life looks like it's going to be supported by that energy of Venus, cooperation, and support coming from people that might be in a position of higher ups, for example, that can support you. The North Node is in the 5th house, and that's where we find a lot of energy around your own application, your own creativity, your own dynamism, what it is that you enjoy, what it is that you like to do. There's a lot more attention there. And that's ruled by that Mars in the 12th house. And so there can be something that is still not it's difficult with it's difficult to interpret the 12th house, the Dustana houses, the difficult houses, the 6th, 8th, 12th houses, the difficult houses. They're not easy to interpret when you don't see the individual chart, because then it sounds super dramatic and it may not be your case. So I hesitate to say certain things. In some cases, it can be a realization that there are people who are working against you, and that you're having to do something bold in a new way, in a creative way, to step up for yourself. And therefore, with the South Node in the 11th, for example, you're letting go of friends. You're saying, you can't do that to me. This doesn't work. Now, we see this even collectively, keeping in mind that the ascendant for the United States is also Sagittarius. So this you could apply also to the US, because these would be the transits for the US. But okay, let's not go too deep into that. Pluto is squaring those nodes from the second house of my possessions, the things I have, what supports me. And it is in the last phases of tension here between the others, between the support from others, and what it is that needs to show up in day-to-day creativity, self-expression. It's different in a mundane chart. I'm not going to go into that. But just to say that tension is there, whether it's personal or mundane. And the tension is coming from what you have understood to be your values, what you've understood to be your belongings, your income, and so on, which has changed dramatically over the last 15 years. Now, this is the tail end of that. And so you're really in for a big shift. So try to understand this from the most healthy and healing point of view. This is, of course, the healing axis, Taurus and Scorpio, in the houses of healing, the 6th and the 12th. So try to work on healing in every single sense of the word Sagittarius, and you'll find the results pay off really, really huge. Saturn is going through your 4th house, and therefore there will be tension or a feeling of lack or a feeling of effort, difficulty, perhaps a sense of even regret around whatever is going on with regards to property, home, where you live, and that's also your individual sort of sense of security, your happiness, your joy. But Sagittarius, you tend to be able to see the glass half full. So this is temporary. Know that Saturn is also stationing direct as of the 4th of November. And so that will change. The energy will change dramatically for you from there. So good luck, Sagittarius, and I'll see you in the next video when it will be your season coming up. Capricorn, we have this eclipse happening in your 5th house of children, of creativity, of commerce, or let's call it entrepreneurship, and where you put in your creative efforts and your competitive drive, and your capacity to make things happen. And this is trining you, so it's actually quite supportive. It's it's one of the more beneficial aspects of this particular eclipse. It's good for Capricorn. Depends on your chart, of course, but the moon in the 5th house can bring a lot of fun. It can bring some benefit in terms of feeling good, relating well with your kids. If there are any difficulties, know that Jupiter is retrograde, and Jupiter is a karaka, or it's a representative of children in the chart, as well as spouse. And so if there is any difficulty there, or in your love life, for example, then just hang on, because by the end of the year, Jupiter will be moving direct again, and that will smooth things out. It will change the atmosphere completely. But just for now, we're working on a sense of tension between the children, your feelings, your creative needs, your emotional expression, your sense of self-expression, and what you want to do out in the world in terms of society or groups that you belong to. There's an incredible drive there. I've said it before that for Capricorn, because Scorpio rules the 11th, there can be this kind of tetchiness around people. There is both the Saturn ruled signs, Capricorn and Aquarius, can be a little bit misanthropic, and it's just like, please go away. And so with Mars in the 11th house, there can be at times a desire to be a leader. Now, that's a great quality, a desire to really get implicated in what's going on in the 11th in terms of your social groups or your ambitions and your dreams for the future. But it can also be a lot for the people around you. And so you want to pay attention to how that might be affecting people. You have Saturn, your ruler, in the 3rd house of communication. And so you might be feeling cut off and not really able to fully communicate with people in a way that you find supportive or in a way that you find connecting with people. So it may feel for the moment like you're not connecting with people, and that can be part of this frustration or this desire to go deeper towards connection with other people. Not to say don't do it by any means, you should absolutely try, but just know that there can be a tendency to maybe bulldoze your way into your goals or your social groups or political groups, for example, that is maybe welcome and maybe not. So it's obviously up to you to judge the appropriateness there. You've got Venus in the 9th, which is really lovely. Venus is in the house. She's ruling the South Node and she's ruling the eclipse in the 5th house. And Venus in the 9th is very high-minded. And so hopefully that will also help you with all of this energy that you're pulling from the 11th into the 5th and then reflecting back in terms of your creativity and how you want to use that and bring that out into the world in some very, very dynamic way from the looks of it. Remembering that Mars is exalted for Capricorns, that will bring you a lot of drive to add to the ambition. Although, hey ho, the South Node is going through your 10th, so you're not supposed to be super ambitious right now, Capricorn. You're supposed to be focusing on your needs, yourself, your psychological growth, your home and family, property, why not? And what it is that you need to feel secure. Right, I'd need to know your natal chart to know more about that. So I'll leave it at that. So good luck, Capricorn. I'll see you in the next video. Aquarius, this is happening in your 10th, in your 4th house, 10th house axis. The 4th house is where the actual lunar eclipse is happening. The moon in the 4th is there can be some instability around where you live. With the moon in the 4th, it can feel paradoxically quite cozy and very welcoming, very secure, but at the same time, the meaning of the moon is insecurity. It's this constant change, shape-shifting. So the moon in the 4th can have a person become very moody or very feeling unstable, and in this case, potentially unsure of the living circumstances, especially because both Uranus and Jupiter are retrograde. And anyway, with Uranus going through the 4th, that would also be one other way of looking at this. Now, Jupiter is also opposed to Mars and Mercury up in the 10th, along with the Sun. So there's an enormous amount of effort you're putting out there in the world, perhaps into career or social projects of some kind, something that you're trying to do out in the community or something you're trying to do in your environment outside the home. And that might be what you're realizing, where there might be a personal cost to that, where the moon is there and you're thinking, doing a lot for everybody else, doing a lot, putting a lot of energy out there, and what's left for me? Am I able to find my own inner resources? Well, this is definitely the time to figure that out. And you've got Venus in the 8th house that is also quite supportive, coming from spouses or partners of all kinds, business partners, and getting some support from other people with Venus in the 8th. That can be also very conducive to working through any psychological or emotional stress that you're going through as well. Really helpful that Venus is coming from the deeper part of your chart. She's also ruling the South Node in the 9th. So you're moving away from this kind of bigger picture, less tangible, broad brush stroke energy, and you're moving towards something very practical, perhaps involving what you actually do, whether that be a vocation or a paid career. And that Mars is ruling that North Node in the 3rd, where it's more about day-to-day application, using your skills, using your talents, developing things in a way that is going to support your community as well, working towards the actual physical, tangible people around you in a way that is good for them and good for you. So that might bring you a kind of an acknowledgement or visibility through that Mars in the 10th, Mars, Sun, Mercury in the 10th, based on what you're doing in your community. Now, Aquarius, you're all about community. So that would be an excellent way of using this energy. Your ruler Saturn is in the second house, retrograde until the 4th of November. And so this has been a period of time where you might be reflecting on your potential lack of money or challenges around money, or a feeling of doubt around your own self-worth. And when Saturn starts to move direct again, you're going to find what was going on since March has had a great meaning to you, has been significant, and you can focus from March until November, going back over things and seeing how things are going to evolve between November and February, where it covers that territory again, and really overcoming any doubts around your value and around how it is that you want to show up in terms of your own capacity to earn, for example, or your own material stuff. What do I want? What do I need? What is of value to me? So all of this is changing you. And of course, we haven't even touched on Pluto moving into your first house, but that I have a whole separate video for. So go and watch that if you haven't already, because Aquarius, I think you know it, you are the one that is really highlighted at this time. It's all about that Aquarian energy right now. All right, good luck with that, and I'll see you in the next video. Pisces, Sun, Moon, or Ascendant, you are having this eclipse in the 3rd house of communications, potentially around siblings as well, cousins, uncles, aunts. And the 3rd house tends to be younger siblings, 11th house tends to be older siblings, but in some cases there's no nuance there. This can also be friends. It's your coffee friends. It's not like your besties. It's the 7th house is your besties. You've got Venus there. That's quite nice, ruling this eclipse in the 3rd. And the 3rd house is the people you see regularly. And it's also your surroundings. It's the life that you are living. And so there's something that you're realizing about your neighborhood, about your way of communicating, about how to understand the people around you, how to engage with the people around you. And it's in opposition with the 9th house, which is perhaps coming from a sense of your purpose, your drive, or what you need to do. This is the axis of learning and understanding. It's about perhaps having to learn something new about, for example, I have a Pisces stellium in the 9th house, but if we take it from the solar houses, it's the 3rd house that this is happening in. And so I have to learn Spanish. And so here I am in my new community learning Spanish, and that is not going terribly well so far. And until I think we have about till the end of the year, I'm giving myself till the end of the year to really, really spruce that up, so that when Jupiter, my ruler, the ruler of Pisces, is direct, then I will be deep into the old Spanish. And so so I'll let you know how that's going. Perhaps it's something more philosophical for you, where your understanding, your beliefs are changing, or there's something that you realize about your everyday life, or your goals, or your sense of what you need to do in terms of potentially around money as well, because if the North Node is in your 2nd house of earnings, while this is also the 3rd house of commercial exchanges as well. And so maybe something to do with your career and what you need to do about that, how you need to step up. Is coming from a place of your higher philosophy, of your higher sense of purpose, or what you believe in this lifetime. As I mentioned, Venus is in the 7th, so you've got a lot of cooperation around that. Venus is exalted for Pisces, so that always helps you. And Venus in the 7th is always pleasant. It's always nice because people around you are supportive and pleasant. And of course, that's ruling the 3rd house of communications as well. And she's also ruling your 8th house of shared resources, where we find the South Node. So keeping in mind the South Node in the 8th house is saying you can't rely on other people anymore. You got to figure this one out. And so the North Node in the 2nd ruled by Mars in the ninth, is actually where you need to put more of your effort, more attention, where it's about your earned income, about investments, about money that you set aside, or about the stuff that you have. And so please be sure to watch the beginning of the video, because I think you'll also get some tips there in terms of beliefs and values and all of these other things, which also apply certainly to Pisces. And this is also where we have that square, one last blast of a couple of weeks of square between Pluto and the nodes, and that is going to be just before Pluto moves into the 12th. Pluto has completely changed your sense of your future goals, your friends, your groups of politics or otherwise social commitments. And this is the end of that. So something really big is shifting. Observe how that might be changing in your everyday experience, and see what it is that might need to be done about that based on what you believe to be true, with that Mars up in the ninth, ruling your North Node. Okay, Pisces, have a good one, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Take care.